Have you ever found yourself stuck replaying an uncomfortable conversation in your head, wishing you'd handled disrespect differently? If you're done letting passive-aggressive remarks or subtle put-downs drain your energy, this video was made exactly for you. Today, we're sharing real-world, no-nonsense techniques that'll help you stand your ground calmly and confidently without losing your cool or getting dragged into drama. From mastering powerful silence to leveraging subtle body language, these strategies are your new secret weapon for reclaiming respect in everyday life. Make sure to watch until the very end for the ultimate tip that brings it all together. And if you love practical wisdom and insights that hit home, don't forget to subscribe and join our supportive community. Life is filled with moments that challenge our sense of self-respect. We navigate environments, schools, workplaces, family gatherings, and social events where people sometimes cross our boundaries or speak in ways that chip away at our confidence. Imagine that sinking feeling you get when someone makes a snide remark, interrupts you mid-sentence, or rolls their eyes at your ideas. It can be subtle, like a passive-aggressive comment, or it can be blatant, like an open insult in front of a crowd. Either way, the result is the same. You feel disrespected, and you have to decide how to respond. For a long time, popular advice might have encouraged us to simply brush off these slights, to be the bigger person and not create a scene. But sometimes, always letting it slide takes a toll on your self-esteem. There are strategies, however, some might call them slightly savage, or even brutally honest, that can help you stand your ground without betraying your own values or stooping to a similar level of disrespect. In this restructured and expanded article, we'll explore how to handle disrespect in a way that preserves your dignity, clarifies your boundaries, and communicates unshakable self-respect. The idea is to avoid flying off the handle or losing your cool. Because once you succumb to anger or frustration, the power dynamics can shift out of your favor. Instead, you'll learn how silence can be your weapon, how your posture and demeanor can communicate volumes, why you should stop explaining yourself to people who only want to judge, and how distancing yourself from toxic relationships can be an act of self-preservation rather than cruelty. We'll also talk about a principle of quiet power, the understanding that sometimes the simplest gestures, or lack thereof, can speak louder than heated arguments. This piece is divided into 3 parts, each containing multiple paragraphs so that you can pause, reflect, and even comment on what resonates with you. You'll notice that each section weaves in the same content from the original message, but is organized differently and expanded for clarity. We'll talk in depth about the silent stare, the power of withholding verbal reactions, the importance of refraining from explaining yourself unnecessarily, the need to keep distance from certain individuals, and the transformational effect of holding your head high. We'll also scatter personal anecdotes and real-life scenarios throughout to demonstrate how these techniques can work. Sometimes living an authentic life involves a refusal to tolerate behavior that undermines your sense of self-worth. The aim here is not to promote aggression or encourage scorched earth tactics. Instead, it's about maintaining composure, ensuring respect, and saving your emotional energy for the people, opportunities, and dreams that actually matter. Put simply, it's time to draw a line in the sand. No more pretending it's okay when someone invades your space or repeatedly acts like you're not worthy of the consideration you deserve. If you've ever felt stuck trying to figure out how to respond to rudeness or condescension, keep reading. By the end, you'll be equipped with practical, no-nonsense strategies for holding your own, no matter who's giving you trouble. Before we dive into specific strategies, let's clarify why respect is so pivotal. It's easy to dismiss discussions of respect as trivial or self-indulgent. After all, we're told we should be strong enough to brush off negativity. We're told that in the grand scheme of things, other people's words don't matter if we're truly secure in ourselves. While there's truth to the idea that what really counts is our own self-perception, respect, or the lack of it, has a cumulative effect on our well-being. If every day you face subtle slights, people interrupting you in meetings, acquaintances asking invasive questions about your personal choices, or so-called friends who deliver constant backhanded compliments, those instances add up. Over time, they can erode your sense of self-worth, making you question whether you're overreacting or whether you deserve to be treated poorly. Respect is also a form of social currency. In relationships, personal, professional, or familial, mutual respect forms the foundation of trust and healthy communication. When that mutual respect is absent, you may find it harder to speak up for yourself or to believe in your ability to affect change. Disrespect can sneak into your psyche, triggering self-doubt and even anxiety. It also normalizes bad behavior. When someone disrespects you and faces no consequences, they learn that it's an acceptable way to interact. This perpetuates a cycle where you're consistently on the receiving end of negativity, and they never have to face the reality that their conduct is harmful or inappropriate. Moreover, understanding respect in a broader sense allows you to set standards for how you live. When you outline what you will and won't tolerate, you're essentially drafting a blueprint for how your energy will be spent. People who don't respect you by their very nature create emotional clutter. They pull focus away from your goals, passions, and joys. They can sap your mental resources with arguments, explanations, and dramas you never asked for. Enforcing boundaries and expecting respect isn't about being haughty or arrogant. It's about safeguarding your peace of mind. We often hear the phrase, "respect starts with you." And that rings true because the way you let others treat you communicates how you feel about yourself. If you believe you're worthy of kindness and consideration, you'll act in ways that uphold that belief, refusing to engage with petty criticisms, rejecting toxic dynamics, and, if needed, removing yourself from harmful environments. This isn't a quick fix or an overnight process. It's a shift in mindset from constantly trying to keep the peace externally to ensuring inner peace by managing who and what you allow into your circle. It takes practice, self-awareness, and sometimes a willingness to feel uncomfortable when you stop caving to external pressure. But trust that it's worth it. Once you master this internal posture of self-respect, external disrespect can't rattle you the same way it once did. Let's launch into the first and perhaps most disarmingly effective technique, the silent stare. Sounds simple, right? It may even sound too simple. How could merely locking eyes with someone and maintaining a calm, unblinking expression possibly alter the dynamic of a disrespectful interaction? But the genius of the silent stare lies in its unexpectedness. Most people who engage in disrespect, whether through side remarks, dismissive attitudes, or outright insults, anticipate a reaction. They feed off the tension, expecting you to become flustered, defensive, or combative. These reactions usually validate their sense of control. Even if they claim they're only joking or didn't mean anything by it, they relish the underlying power play. They speak, you respond, and the emotional seesaw begins. When you choose not to vocalize your frustration but instead respond with silence, you send a signal that you're not playing their game. The silent stare forces the other person to confront their own words without the usual volley of excuses, appeasements, or angry comebacks. Picture this scenario. You're in a meeting and a colleague decides to interrupt you for the third time. Instead of saying, "Let me finish," or "Please don't interrupt me," you simply pause, turn your gaze to them, and hold it. You don't shift your eyes nervously, and you don't fidget. For a few seconds, let that quiet seep in until they become aware of how out of line they were. It's potent because it disrupts the script. They expected you to fluster, maybe to stammer an explanation of why you deserve to speak, or to laugh it off awkwardly. Instead, you've given them nothing to latch onto. It's worth noting that this technique can initially feel awkward. You might worry that it's passive-aggressive or that it lacks the necessary directness to call out disrespect. However, the goal here is not to avoid confrontation, but to reclaim power. The silent stare is not the same as a fearful silence. It's a deliberate choice, a moment of bold non-reactivity that reveals confidence in your right to be respected. It also flips the focus back onto the individual exhibiting rude behavior. Rather than letting them make you feel small, you create a space where they must reflect on what they just said or did. Often, they'll become uncomfortable enough to adjust their behavior, at least in that moment. In some cases, the silent stare might prompt the disrespectful person to backtrack or apologize. In others, they might pretend it didn't happen. Either way, you've not wasted energy on a defensive explanation or a shouting match. You've let your composure speak for you. By practicing the silent stare, you'll begin to recognize the subtle power of restraint. Some people argue that holding someone's gaze without speaking can be confrontational, but it only feels confrontational to those who aren't used to being held accountable. You're not meeting their negative energy with more negativity, you're simply shining a spotlight on it. Think of it as a quiet mirror. You're letting them see themselves unfiltered, and that can be more rattling than any insult you could hurl back. While the silent stare is one form of harnessing stillness, another approach is to remain verbally silent altogether. This goes beyond just eye contact. It involves refusing to engage in the conversation when the content or tone is disrespectful. Let's be clear, though, this isn't about giving someone the cold shoulder in a vindictive way. It's about reserving your words, your energy, and your emotional responses for dialogues that are meaningful. Many individuals who are disrespectful thrive on eliciting a reaction. It grants them a sense of power, a rush that they can sway your emotional state with a few choice words. The moment they see you flustered or rushing to explain yourself, they know they've made an impact. Imagine you're at a social event and an acquaintance starts making snide remarks about your life choices. Perhaps they question your career path or your relationship status, or they hint that you're not doing enough with your life. Typically, you might try to correct them, give them context, or even argue back. But consider instead answering with nothing. You might nod politely or maintain neutral eye contact, but withhold any verbal defense. After a few attempts, the person often loses steam, realizing they're talking into a void of non-reaction. Silence in this scenario is not passive. It's an intentional refusal to grant them the satisfaction of your emotional energy. This approach can be especially effective when dealing with chronic interrupters, gossipers, or individuals who use aggressive sarcasm. They toss out barbed comments and wait for you to rise to the bait. By maintaining silence, you're effectively saying, "I see your attempt, and I'm not interested." Far from being weak, it underscores a self-assured stance. You don't feel compelled to justify your value or your decisions to someone who has shown disrespect. It's a practical demonstration of self-respect, ensuring you don't go down the rabbit hole of endless justifications or fiery confrontations that leave you drained. One concern people often have is that silence might be interpreted as agreement. Rest assured, silence can be a strong disagreement in itself, provided it's coupled with the right demeanor, calm, composed, and resolute. Moreover, it's a powerful way to set a boundary without getting tangled in an argument that's likely to escalate. Of course, there will be times when you need to speak up directly, especially in situations involving harassment or serious harm. But for those everyday slights and backhanded comments, letting them evaporate in the absence of your engagement can be surprisingly liberating. Over time, you'll notice that you no longer feel compelled to respond to every taunt or piece of unsolicited advice. You become more discerning about where you invest your voice, and that, in its own subtle way, increases your personal authority. One of the most pervasive habits many of us have is the need to explain or defend every single decision we make, especially when challenged by someone disrespectful. We might feel obligated to detail why we changed jobs, why we skipped a social function, or why we decided to spend our weekend a certain way. Part of this compulsion to explain comes from a desire to be understood. Another part is fear-based. We worry that if we don't justify ourselves, others will think less of us or label us as inconsiderate. But here's a liberating truth. You owe no one an explanation for how you choose to live your life, particularly those who question your decisions from a place of contempt or condescension. When you stop explaining yourself to people who only seek to judge, you reclaim a huge portion of your mental and emotional bandwidth. Picture the friend who always wants a detailed breakdown of why you didn't attend a mutual gathering, or the coworker who pries into your personal preferences just to criticize them. If you notice a pattern where your explanations never satisfy them and they continue to belittle your choices, ask yourself what good your justifications are doing. Chances are you're expending energy on someone who isn't genuinely curious or supportive. Instead, they're looking for ammunition to question you further. By ceasing to explain, you cut off their supply. Does this mean you should never discuss your reasoning or share your thought process with anyone? Of course not. In healthy relationships, where respect is mutual, sharing the why behind your decisions can foster closeness, empathy, and better understanding. The key is discerning where to invest that openness. If a friend or family member is legitimately concerned about your well-being, offering some insight might be worthwhile. But if someone is merely using your explanations as a platform to put you down, you're under no obligation to elaborate. A concise response like, "That's what felt right for me," is more than enough. This ties back to self-worth. Often, we over-explain because we secretly crave validation. We want the other person to see that we're making logical or acceptable choices. When you break free from that need, you start to develop a sturdier sense of identity. You realize that your decisions are valid simply because they align with your values, your circumstances, and your priorities. You don't require another person's stamp of approval to feel confident about what you're doing. It's both empowering and refreshing, like stepping off a treadmill you never wanted to be on in the first place. Yet, breaking the explaining habit can be difficult at first. You might fear social friction. Some people will undoubtedly label you as aloof or uncooperative, but that's often because they're unaccustomed to having their nosy questions go unanswered. Over time, you'll discover that people who genuinely respect you will adapt, while those who rely on disrespect will move on to easier targets. Your refusal to explain becomes a statement that your life choices are not a community project. Instead, they belong to you, your autonomy, your responsibility, your business. Sometimes, no matter how poised your silent stare is or how calmly you remove yourself from a debate, the person in question persists in disrespect. They might be part of your social circle, a relative, or someone at work who you can't easily avoid. In these cases, one of the most effective strategies is to keep your distance. This doesn't necessarily mean cutting them off forever or staging a dramatic exit, but it does involve recalibrating how accessible you make yourself to them. If they frequently call or text you with negativity, you can choose not to respond right away, or at all. If they always want to meet up but use the occasion to belittle your accomplishments, you can decline more often than you accept. Keeping your distance is, in essence, creating a buffer zone that protects your emotional well-being. Certain individuals thrive on drama, friction, or belittling others, and being too close to them can feel draining. It's not about revenge or punishing them, it's about self-preservation. When you remove yourself from constant exposure to that toxic energy, You'll likely notice improvements in your mood, stress levels, and even your sense of personal identity. You'll find yourself thinking less about how to respond to their negativity and more about what genuinely interests you, your projects, hobbies, and healthy relationships. This boundary can look different depending on the nature of the relationship. In a professional setting, minimizing contact might mean scheduling fewer one-on-one meetings, restricting your communication to email, or ensuring you have a colleague present when interactions are unavoidable. In a family context, you might need to limit visits or gently decline invites to gatherings where you know this person will pounce on every opportunity to bring you down. Yes, there can be cultural or familial pressures that make this challenging, but remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. Prioritizing your mental and emotional health isn't selfish. It's necessary if you want to be a stable, supportive individual for those who truly matter. Of course, this can be uncomfortable, especially if you've known the person for a long time. Guilt or nostalgia might creep in, prompting you to second-guess whether you're being too harsh. But keep in mind that enduring disrespect for the sake of history or out of fear of social repercussions does no one any favors. It can lead to long-term emotional fatigue, resentment, and a sense that you're stuck in an unbreakable pattern. By creating space, you give both parties the chance to reassess the relationship. Maybe they'll notice your absence and realize they've overstepped. Maybe they won't change at all, which confirms you made the right decision. In either scenario, you stand to gain clarity and protect your peace. We've explored a set of potent strategies: silent stares, verbal silence, refusing to explain, and setting distance, that all serve as lines of defense against disrespect. These can dramatically shift your daily interactions, particularly if you put them into practice thoughtfully. However, there's another crucial piece to this puzzle: how you carry yourself and project your sense of worth. Even if you never say a word, your posture, eye contact, and general demeanor can either telegraph vulnerability or confidence. This is where holding your head high comes into play. It's not just a physical posture, it's a mindset that transforms how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Moving forward, we'll delve into this idea of carrying yourself as though you already command the respect you seek. Some find this notion intimidating, worrying it might come off as arrogance, but in truth, there's a clear difference between self-respect and prideful conceit. Holding your head high doesn't mean looking down on others, it means refusing to let external negativity drag you down. It's a declaration of independence from the judgments, sneers, and unwarranted criticisms you encounter. Too often, people who dish out disrespect do so because they sense an opening. The moment you display uncertainty or doubt, they zero in on it. By contrast, when you stand firm, they may think twice before directing their usual jabs at you. In the coming sections, we'll expand on how this confident posture ties together all the strategies we've covered so far. We'll talk about why it's so important for both your own emotional health and for shifting social dynamics in your favor. We'll also build on the earlier points like silence and refraining from explanations to show how they mesh seamlessly with a physically and mentally upright stance. Collectively, these approaches do more than ward off disrespect. They foster a daily reality where you have fewer conflicts, less stress, and deeper self-trust. So, if you've ever felt overshadowed in conversations, if you've been the one quietly stewing over someone else's disregard, or if you're just tired of tiptoeing around people who should have no say in your personal truth, stay tuned. Part 2 will guide you deeper into these principles, offering additional anecdotes and clarifications. Remember, this journey isn't about aggression or teaching someone a lesson, it's about dignity. And once you anchor yourself in the knowledge that you deserve respect simply by virtue of being a human with inherent worth, you'll find that your interactions begin to reflect that unshakable foundation. Welcome to Part 2, where we'll continue building on the themes introduced in Part 1. By now, you might be seeing that effectively handling disrespect isn't about grandiose power plays or loud demands for attention. It's more about strategic restraint, deliberate boundary setting, and clear signals of self-assuredness. One crucial element we teased at the end of the previous section is the concept of carrying yourself confidently or holding your head high. This is more than a platitude. When you walk into a room with upright posture and your gaze level, you announce your presence without uttering a single word. That initial impression often sets the tone for how people approach you. Why does confidence matter so much in the context of disrespect? Think of it this way: individuals who target others with rude remarks or belittling behavior tend to size up their audience. They look for signs of hesitation, self-doubt, or a willingness to appease. This doesn't mean you're at fault for someone else's bad behavior, of course. It signals that you're not an easy mark for power games. For instance, if a workplace bully senses that you're unshakable, they're more likely to move on rather than waste time on someone who won't react with fear or submissiveness. Confidence also insulates you from internalizing every slight. When you're grounded in a solid sense of self, it becomes easier to recognize that other people's disrespectful actions often say more about them than about you. If a colleague dismisses your ideas in a meeting, you can acknowledge that it's their issue. Maybe they feel threatened, or just lack basic courtesy. You can take appropriate steps to address it without letting it gnaw at your self-esteem. Conversely, if you're lacking confidence, you might end up internalizing their commentary, questioning the value of your own contributions. Over time, this can spiral into self-doubt that affects not just work but your broader sense of identity. It's also worth noting that confidence isn't the same as being confrontational. Holding your head high doesn't mean you're constantly ready to lash out or that you're spoiling for a fight. Rather, it means you are mentally and emotionally secure enough to respond thoughtfully, or not respond at all, when someone tries to get a rise out of you. By keeping your emotions steady, you maintain control over the interaction, which can be incredibly disarming for those who rely on provocation to assert dominance. This all circles back to the central idea of self-respect. When you value yourself, you naturally demonstrate that through your presence. And when that presence is felt, people who have made a habit out of disrespect may find themselves at a loss for how to deal with you. Let's dive deeper into this idea of holding your head high, which was introduced at the end of Part 1. At its core, it's a physical embodiment of self-worth. We often hear coaches, mentors, or motivational speakers talk about body language, the importance of standing straight, making eye contact, and keeping your shoulders back. While it can sound like a series of superficial adjustments, the mind and body are intricately connected. When you literally hold your head high, your mind receives signals that you are in a position of self-assuredness, which then reinforces your internal sense of worth. Conversely, slouching or avoiding eye contact can inadvertently tell your subconscious that you're insecure or less deserving of space. In interactions where disrespect is on the table, posture and bearing can have a profound impact. Picture two scenarios. In the first, you're hunched over, gazing down, and mumbling your responses when someone insults you. In the second, you respond with calm composure. Your voice is level, you look them in the eye, and your posture remains upright. Even if your verbal reply is the same in both scenarios, the impression you leave is vastly different. The second scenario communicates, "I hear what you're saying, but I will not be diminished by it." The first scenario, however, can unintentionally signal submission, or at least a lack of certainty. One personal anecdote might help illustrate this point. I once attended a workshop where the speaker conducted an experiment. We were asked to stand up and deliver a simple self-introduction with poor posture, heads down, shoulders drooping, and then repeat the introduction while standing tall and making intentional eye contact. The difference was striking. Even though we used identical words, our audience perceived us as more competent, trustworthy, and likable in the second scenario. Extrapolate that to a tense moment where someone is rude or dismissive, your composure can either confirm their disrespect or subtly challenge it. Holding your head high also entails resisting the urge to shrink yourself to avoid confrontation. Many of us have been conditioned to make ourselves small, especially if we've grown up in environments where standing out was frowned upon or unsafe. But ironically, when you shrink, you may become a more appealing target for those looking to exert power. By simply taking up the space that's rightfully yours, you convey that you're not someone to be easily trifled with. This doesn't mean you have to walk around puffed up like you own the room. Natural confidence is more about ease and steadiness than bravado, and that's often enough to deter a disrespectful person from persisting. Of course, it's important to note that holding your head high doesn't guarantee you'll never encounter rudeness again. Some individuals will project their insecurities onto others no matter what, but it does shift how those encounters affect you. Rather than absorbing the disrespect, you can see it for what it is: someone else's negativity, not a reflection of your own worth. Over time, consistently carrying yourself with dignity also attracts people who appreciate and respect that confidence. As you build connections with those individuals, you may find fewer reasons to deal with the types of people who rely on disrespect as a tool for control. In other words, your posture can influence the company you keep. By now we've covered 5 core approaches: the silent stare, a general policy of strategic silence, stopping the endless cycle of explanations, creating distance when necessary, and confidently holding your head high. Each of these strategies, taken alone, can be useful in neutralizing everyday forms of disrespect. However, the magic truly happens when you allow them to coexist and reinforce one another. Think of them as different components of an overall stance on self-respect. Each one is a tool in your toolkit, ready to be employed depending on the circumstance. For instance, you might start with a silent stare when someone interrupts you or makes a biting comment. This alone can send a strong signal that you're not going to play their game. If they persist, you might respond with silent non-engagement or give a short, non-explanatory statement, indicating you don't owe them an elaborate justification. Over time, if the negativity continues, you choose to keep more distance, declining invitations, or reducing contact to protect your energy. Throughout all of this, you maintain your posture of self-assuredness, head high, shoulders back, voice calm, so that your presence alone discourages further disrespect. What's important to realize is that each of these techniques is rooted in the same core principle. You have the right to decide how you respond to someone else's behavior. Traditional social scripts often pressure us to appease or explain. We're told to avoid making things awkward by calling someone out on their rudeness or by disengaging too abruptly. But as you adopt these strategies, you'll notice that you're not being disrespectful in return. You're simply withholding your time, energy, and explanations from those who haven't earned them. This is a shift from external validation, constantly worrying about how others perceive you, to internal validation, where you gauge your actions by your own sense of integrity and self-worth. There is an added benefit. You become more aware of your own triggers. If you find that a certain type of disrespect hits you harder, maybe it's someone questioning your career choices or someone ridiculing your personal interests, you can prepare a response or a chosen silence that's consistent with your new boundaries. Being proactive in this way helps you avoid impulsive reactions you might regret. You learn to respond, not react, which is a cornerstone of emotional intelligence. As you apply these tactics, expect some people to resist the new dynamic. They may accuse you of being arrogant, moody, or too good for them. This is often their discomfort speaking. They're not used to you standing firm. Don't let it deter you. Stay grounded in the knowledge that your boundaries aren't a sign of rudeness, but a sign of healthy self-respect. Ultimately, you'll find that these strategies do more than just handle disrespectful encounters. They help you cultivate a life where disrespect is less likely to take root in the first place. A common stumbling block when people first try these techniques is guilt or fear of social backlash. After all, many of us were raised to keep the peace, be polite, and accommodate others' feelings, even at the expense of our own. We might think, what if they think I'm rude? Or, what if people start avoiding me because I'm not my usual, accommodating self? These concerns are understandable, particularly if you've spent most of your life operating under the assumption that you must be agreeable to maintain harmony. But here's a reframe that might help. What kind of harmony exists when your boundaries are constantly being trampled? True harmony in relationships is built on mutual respect, not one-sided compliance. If someone is consistently disrespectful and then accuses you of being rude the moment you stand up for yourself, either verbally or through actions like distancing, they're revealing a lot about what they valued in your relationship. Often they valued your willingness to endure their behavior without pushback. That's not genuine friendship or collegiality. That's a power dynamic that benefits them at your expense. It's also worth noting that people who truly care about you might initially be surprised by the changes in your demeanor, especially if you've shifted from a pattern of over-explaining or constant people-pleasing. However, if they genuinely respect you, they'll adapt. They might ask questions like, "I've noticed you don't explain yourself as much. Are you okay?" Or, "You seem quieter lately. Is there something going on?" These inquiries can open a doorway to more honest communication. You can let them know that you're learning to set healthier boundaries and that it's not about shutting them out, it's about preserving your peace. True friends or supportive colleagues might even applaud you for your newfound self-assurance. Fear of social repercussions might also stem from a concern about losing connections. This is a valid worry if your circle largely comprises individuals who are used to you playing a more submissive role. Shifting that dynamic can cause friction. Some relationships may even fade. While this can be painful, it's also an opportunity to reevaluate who deserves a place in your life. If a relationship hinges entirely on your willingness to tolerate disrespect, is that really a relationship you want to maintain? Additionally, consider the flip side of fear, the cost of not implementing these strategies. How many more hours, days, or years of your life do you want to spend feeling small or upset after each disrespectful exchange? How many times do you want to replay those moments in your head, wishing you'd responded differently? The emotional toll of living without boundaries far outweighs the temporary discomfort you might face when people realize you're no longer tolerating poor treatment. Over time, as you become consistent in your newfound stance, that fear will dissipate. You'll discover a new normal, one where you're respected, or at least unbothered by those who choose not to treat you well. And that's a life upgrade worth the initial turbulence. Let's illustrate the synergy of these strategies with a real-life scenario, focusing on the workplace. Suppose you have a colleague named Jordan who has a habit of interrupting you during team meetings, undermining your suggestions, and offering passive-aggressive comments about your work ethic. Initially, you might have tried reasoning with them or explaining why your ideas have merit. Maybe you also tried to ignore the barbs, hoping they'd get the hint, but Jordan persists, and the daily disrespect starts wearing on you. First, you try the silent stare approach. During the next team meeting, when Jordan cuts you off, you halt your speech and look directly at them. Calmly, steadily, no words, no eye roll, just a firm gaze. You maintain it until they awkwardly finish their interruption. Then you resume speaking without acknowledging their comment. Jordan is momentarily caught off guard, unsure why you didn't engage in the usual back and forth. Over time, they realize you're not going to expend energy defending yourself against every interruption. Next, you embrace more silence outside of meetings. When Jordan sends snarky instant messages or emails, you either respond with a minimal "noted, thanks," or choose not to reply at all if it's a non-essential matter. You don't offer explanations or justifications for your decisions. You focus on your tasks and keep your interactions strictly professional. If Jordan demands to know why a certain project was handled a certain way, you respond succinctly, "That's the approach recommended by management," or "That's what the client requested," and leave it at that. Should Jordan's behavior escalate, you then consider creating more distance. Maybe you adjust your schedule so you're not around when Jordan typically lingers in the office, or you request to collaborate with others whenever possible. You hold your head high throughout all these actions, physically and mentally conveying that you're not looking for conflict. You're simply protecting your space. After a few weeks or months, you notice Jordan either changes tack, maybe they back off, realizing their attempts to bait you no longer work, or you've managed to lessen the frequency of negative interactions by limiting exposure. This scenario shows how each technique interlocks. It also demonstrates that these strategies don't require a confrontational showdown. You didn't march into your boss's office yelling about disrespect, though in some cases, formal channels might be necessary. Rather, you employed subtle yet firm tactics that re-established control over how you allow others to treat you. Over time, you might even find that you've grown into a more respected figure in your workplace, simply because your boundaries are clear, consistent, and confidently enforced. Let's shift to a social scenario, perhaps one involving close friends, acquaintances, or even extended family. You might have someone in your circle, let's call her Tanya, who constantly aims little jabs your way. She might say things like, "Wow, I can't believe you're still single," or "Don't you think that hobby of yours is a bit childish?" Often Tanya couches these comments as humor or concern, leaving you uncertain whether you should call her out or laugh it off. But you walk away from gatherings feeling slightly bruised and wondering why you subject yourself to that atmosphere. Using the techniques we've discussed, you first decide to stop explaining yourself. If Tanya asks about why you haven't settled down, you respond with a neutral, "That's just what works for me right now." You don't elaborate on your dating life or life philosophy because you know it'll become fodder for more digs. When Tanya presses further, "Well, aren't you worried you'll regret it later?" you switch to silent non-engagement. Maybe you answer with a polite smile or move the conversation along without addressing her remarks. As gatherings continue, you employ the silent stare when Tanya says something especially cutting. It might be uncomfortable in a social setting, but it's also effective. Others in the group might notice the tension, which can inadvertently hold Tanya accountable for her comments. By not reacting verbally, you force her to examine her words without a comedic or defensive retort from you. Sometimes people like Tanya thrive on a witty back and forth because it fuels their sense of superiority. Deny them that, and you may quickly see them backpedal. Over time, if Tanya doesn't change her behavior, you begin to keep your distance. You don't shun group events entirely, but you arrive a bit later or leave earlier, limiting the window in which Tanya can monopolize your attention. You may also engage more one-on-one with friends who treat you kindly, thereby reducing Tanya's opportunity for group-based jabs. All the while, you hold your head high, literally and figuratively, and you don't slump or pretend not to notice what's happening. You simply decide it's beneath you to engage. Eventually, one of two things happens. Tanya senses that her attempts to undermine you no longer land, so she either tones it down or redirects her energy elsewhere, or she persists, and you become increasingly absent from the spaces she dominates. While it might feel bittersweet to miss some social moments, you reap the benefit of preserving your sanity. You also open space to deepen relationships with people who uplift you rather than tear you down. In time, the group dynamics might even shift, as others notice Tanya's behavior isn't receiving the validation it once did. You might find some folks confiding in you that they too felt uneasy about Tanya's comments, but didn't know how to address them. Through it all, you're modeling self-respect. This isn't about turning everyone against Tanya or instigating drama. You haven't publicly shamed her or given a rousing speech about her flaws. You've merely refused to be her verbal punching bag. In doing so, you maintain your dignity and encourage a healthier group atmosphere. You'll likely discover that your overall enjoyment of social gatherings increases, and you're less anxious about who might say what. Your emotional resources go towards genuine connections and memorable experiences, not endless tussles over trivial criticisms. Having seen how these strategies can play out in real-world contexts, both professional and social, you might be feeling more confident about applying them yourself. Recognize, however, that breaking old habits and adopting a stance of unflinching self-respect takes time. You may have slip-ups where you revert to over-explaining or you cave in to the urge to argue back. That's normal. Self-growth is rarely a straight, upward trajectory. The important part is recognizing when it happens and consciously steering yourself back to a more empowering response next time. Also, don't underestimate the power of small incremental changes. You don't have to go from people-pleaser to stoic boundary setter overnight. Maybe you start by choosing silence in one conversation where you typically defend yourself. Then, the next time, you add a silent stare. Over subsequent interactions, you integrate the posture of holding your head high. Step by step, you build a new pattern of response that gradually becomes second nature. In Part 3, we'll discuss the internal shifts that accompany these outward behaviors. Because while a silent stare or a confident posture can be immensely effective, they are even stronger when backed by a genuine internal belief in your own worth. We'll explore how to sustain your mental and emotional well-being, remain consistent in your boundaries, and handle pushback from those who might be uncomfortable with the new you. We'll also examine the ripple effects, how your transformation can influence your relationships, career, and personal growth. Ultimately, this isn't just about shutting down disrespect. It's about creating a life in which respect, and self-respect in particular, is woven into every thread. As you become more adept at these techniques, you'll likely find that you have more mental space, less stress, and a generally brighter outlook on human interactions. It's not that negativity disappears from the world, but you become less susceptible to its sting. The final part of this article will guide you through solidifying these practices into a lasting personal ethic, so that respect becomes not just something you chase, but something you naturally command through your presence. Now that you've seen how to tactically handle disrespect through silence, distance, and confident posture, it's time to delve into the inner work that supports these outward actions. After all, techniques can only take you so far if, deep down, you still harbor doubts about your own worth. Part of what makes strategies like the silent stare or non-engagement so powerful is the calm self-assuredness behind them. If you feel perpetually anxious about how others perceive you, maintaining steady eye contact or holding your head high can feel like you're faking it. Over time, that incongruence may leave you exhausted or cause you to revert to old patterns of self-effacement. So how do you align your mindset with these newfound behaviors? It starts with clarifying your personal value system. Ask yourself, what do I truly believe about my worth as a person, separate from any external achievements or validations? This can be a tough question if you've spent years placing your self-esteem in the hands of others. But as you gradually unearth a sense of inherent worth, a belief that you deserve kindness, space, and respect simply by virtue of existing, your actions in social situations will become more naturally aligned. You'll feel less like you're performing confidence and more like you're embodying it. Another key to this internal shift is self-compassion. Each time you successfully employ a boundary, be it silence, distance, or a calm refusal to explain, acknowledge the courage it took. If it didn't go perfectly, that's okay. Celebrate the attempt rather than berate yourself for any perceived shortcomings. Over time, self-compassion reinforces a healthier relationship with yourself. You stop seeing slip-ups as evidence of failure and start viewing them as opportunities to refine your approach. Journaling or reflective writing can help integrate these changes. For instance, after a challenging interaction, you might jot down what happened, how you responded, and how you felt. Then, reflect on whether your actions aligned with your new commitment to self-respect. This practice cements your learning and helps you course-correct if you notice old habits creeping back in. Moreover, it can serve as a record of growth. Flipping back through earlier entries, you'll see how far you've come in standing your ground. Ultimately, the inner work isn't a one-time project, it's an ongoing dialogue with yourself. As your outer behavior shifts to discourage disrespect, your mind also starts adapting, realizing you're capable of enforcing boundaries without catastrophic social repercussions. You discover that many of your old fears, like everyone abandoning you or labeling you as hostile, are overstated. With each boundary you set, you gain more evidence that you can be both firm and cared for. Over time, self-respect moves from being a concept you occasionally practice to being a stable trait at the core of your identity. One reality of practicing these strategies is that not everyone will respond positively. Some individuals may double down on their disrespect once they realize you're no longer an easy target. They might escalate their behavior, perhaps by becoming more openly hostile or trying to rally others to their side. This can be unsettling, especially if you're new to standing your ground. The first instinct might be to retreat to old, people-pleasing behaviors just to restore a sense of peace. But consider that a temporary increase in tension can be part of the boundary-setting process. When someone has grown accustomed to treating you poorly, they may feel entitled to continue doing so. Your decision to disengage or to remain silent in the face of their provocations disrupts their usual script. They might attempt to reassert dominance, hoping you'll crack and revert to your previous role as a compliant sounding board. Recognize this escalation for what it is, a last-ditch effort to regain control. If you stay the course, continuing to employ silence, distance, and calm confidence, their tactics often fizzle. In extreme cases, especially in professional settings, you may need to escalate the matter yourself to a supervisor, human resources, or another authority figure. If someone's disrespect crosses into harassment or creates a hostile environment, your personal strategies should be complemented by institutional support. Document instances of disrespect, keep records of communications, and seek advice from trusted mentors or colleagues who understand the company culture. Know that setting boundaries doesn't mean you refuse all forms of conflict resolution. It means you only engage in those conflicts in a manner that respects both your dignity and, if appropriate, organizational guidelines. For personal relationships, escalation might look different. You could seek counseling, individually or jointly if it's a family member or close friend, or you might choose to be more explicit about your boundaries. For instance, a statement like, "I won't continue this conversation if you speak to me in that tone," can sometimes be necessary if your silent cues go unnoticed. By articulating your boundaries, you give the other person a chance to self-correct. If they refuse, you follow through by ending the interaction. Pushback can also come from bystanders or mutual acquaintances. They might say, "You two used to joke around so much. Why are you so serious now?" Or, "I've never seen you so distant." Are you mad? In these instances, be prepared with a brief, calm explanation if you wish. I'm focusing on a more respectful way of communicating. Or, I'm just not engaging with negative jokes anymore. You don't owe anyone a long justification, but a simple statement can clarify your shift. Over time, if they respect you, they'll adapt, and perhaps even applaud your growth. If they take offense, that signals they might have been complicit in the old dynamics. In either case, their reaction isn't a reflection of your worth, it's just a sign of who aligns with your new standard of respect. Even when you successfully assert boundaries and ward off disrespect, you might still experience emotional turbulence after the fact. Feeling shaken, sad, or even guilty isn't uncommon, particularly in the early stages of using these tactics. You might wonder if you were too harsh or if you misunderstood the other person's intentions. Self-doubt can creep in, accompanied by thoughts like, maybe I should have just laughed it off, or what if I damaged the relationship irreparably? It's essential to acknowledge these feelings without letting them dictate your next steps. One way to process the emotional aftermath is through self-reflection and, if possible, a trusted confidant's perspective. Talking through the event with a friend who respects your boundaries can help you reaffirm that you acted within reason. Hearing an outside view can often crystallize that the disrespect was indeed real and that your response was measured. Alternatively, spending time in solitude, perhaps journaling or taking a walk, can help you sift through your emotion. The goal is to identify where those feelings of discomfort come from. Are they rooted in fear of losing approval, or in a genuine sense of regret over something you said or did? If you conclude that your response was appropriate given the situation, let that assurance strengthen your resolve. Remind yourself of the reasons you decided to enforce a boundary in the first place. Over time, these moments of self-condition will lessen the intensity of the post-boundary anxiety. However, if you realize you overreacted or if you genuinely wish you'd handled it differently, consider that part of your learning process. You might decide to offer a concise apology if you truly feel it's warranted, without diminishing the validity of your boundary. For instance, I'm sorry for raising my voice, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. Another emotional factor to consider is the relief that often comes after these interactions. Setting a boundary can be empowering. It can feel like you're finally breathing fresh air after being cooped up. Savor that sense of liberation. Recognize it as a sign that you're aligning your external world with your internal sense of worth. Let that feeling fuel you to continue respecting yourself in future interactions. When you consistently integrate these strategies, silent stares, measured silence, minimal explanations, strategic distancing, and dignified self-presentation, your life begins to transform. One immediate effect is a reduction in stress. Rather than dreading encounters with certain colleagues or relatives, you develop a quiet confidence that you can handle whatever disrespect they dish out. You also stop replaying scenarios in your head, wondering if you should have said something clever or if you came across as weak. You know exactly how you'll respond next time, which frees up mental real estate for more fulfilling pursuits. Over time, you may notice that some disrespectful people either change their behavior around you or fade from your social scene altogether. This isn't necessarily because they've reformed, but because their usual tactics no longer yield a satisfying reaction. You've set a precedent. If they want to be part of your life, they must treat you with respect or accept that they'll receive no energy or engagement from you. In many cases, they move on to someone else who still plays by the old rules. While this can sound callous, it's a reflection of how power dynamics shift when you no longer provide an audience for someone's negativity. Furthermore, these boundaries have a way of strengthening your existing positive relationships. Friends and colleagues who genuinely care about you will see your self-respect and be inspired to treat you, and possibly themselves, better. You might even find yourself attracting new, healthier relationships. When you carry yourself as though you know your worth, you send out signals that encourage similarly respectful people to connect with you. It's a form of emotional magnetism. You draw in those who resonate with your energy, while repelling those who seek easy targets. A deeper psychological benefit is increased self-trust. Each time you navigate a challenging interaction by setting and holding a boundary, you reaffirm that you can rely on yourself to maintain self-respect. This fosters an inner dialogue of confidence, reducing the anxiety that can come from feeling powerless in the face of constant disrespect. You begin to see yourself as the author of your own experiences, rather than a character reacting to someone else's plot twists. This sense of agency often spills over into other areas of life, career decisions, creative pursuits, and personal milestones, allowing you to make choices more in line with your authentic desires rather than external pressures. It's one thing to set boundaries with casual acquaintances or coworkers you're not particularly close to, but what about the people who truly matter to you? Family members, long-term friends, or romantic partners? Disrespect can surface even in these close bonds, and it can cut deeper because the emotional stakes are higher. Perhaps a parent constantly criticizes your life choices, a spouse resorts to belittling when stressed, or a close friend frequently makes passive-aggressive remarks. In these scenarios, your strategies remain valuable, but the application might require more nuance. For instance, distance could be harder to implement if you live with the person or see them regularly. You might need to carve out emotional space rather than purely physical distance. This could involve creating personal rituals, like journaling in the morning or meditating after work, to shield yourself from the impact of their negative words. You might also set up safe zones in your home where conflict or disrespectful conversation is off limits, agreeing that certain times or spaces are dedicated to peaceful coexistence rather than confrontation. Communication also takes on a more delicate role in these relationships. While silence and the silent stare can still be powerful, you might find that a deeper conversation is needed to preserve the relationship. This doesn't mean abandoning your boundary. Rather, it involves stating it clearly and expressing how the disrespect affects you emotionally. For example, you might say, "When you speak to me in that tone, I feel disrespected and hurt, and I'm going to walk away from the conversation if it continues." This approach combines open communication with a firm boundary, giving your loved one the chance to correct course if they genuinely value your relationship. Of course, confronting close friends or family about disrespect can trigger intense reactions. They may feel blindsided or defensive. They might argue that you've misunderstood their intentions or that they're just telling it like it is. But if you remain consistent, both in your stance and your willingness to have mature dialogue, you open the door to potentially improving the relationship. If they continue to disrespect you despite your clarity, then you face a difficult choice. Accept the ongoing disrespect or limit your involvement with them, even if it's painful. Sometimes the healthiest option is to enact a degree of distance, even from those we love. It might be temporary, giving them a wake-up call, or it might become permanent if they refuse to meet you halfway. On the flip side, when a close relationship adapts positively to your new boundaries, it can deepen into something truly supportive and mutual. This is the ideal outcome. Your loved one respects your stance, sees the sincerity behind it, and starts making real efforts to communicate more kindly. While it won't happen overnight, these efforts can lead to an atmosphere where both parties feel valued and heard. In such an environment, your emotional bond grows stronger precisely because it's built on genuine respect. Ultimately, the question to ask yourself is, do I want to maintain this relationship enough to do the hard work of boundary setting and dialogue? If the answer is yes, then combine these techniques with open-hearted conversations. If the answer is no, or if you realize the other person is incapable of genuine respect, it's time to consider scaling back their role in your life. This kind of clarity frees you to invest in relationships that truly nourish you. Adopting these techniques, silent stares, strategic silence, minimal explanations, keeping distance and holding your head high, requires repetition to become second nature. In the early stages, you might deploy them sporadically, especially in moments when disrespect catches you off guard. But to truly reap the benefits, you need consistency. This means being prepared to uphold your boundaries in both obvious situations and more subtle ones. It's easy to stare someone down when they openly insult you in public. But what about small cutting remarks from a friend you generally like? In those quieter moments, it's tempting to let things slide for the sake of keeping the peace. Yet, that's precisely when your new habits need the most reinforcement. One strategy to maintain consistency is to set personal benchmarks or intentions. For example, you might decide, anytime someone interrupts me twice during a conversation, I will employ the silent stare or minimal response strategy. Or, if a friend makes a snide remark about my life choices, I will not explain or justify. These tiny commitments can be noted in your journal or on a mental checklist. They serve as reminders that you're actively reprogramming your responses. Each time you follow through, you reinforce the neural pathways in your brain that correlate self-respect with immediate action. It can also be helpful to find an accountability partner, maybe a friend or therapist who supports your growth. Share your goals with them, and do periodic check-ins where you discuss recent incidents and how you handled them. Having someone else witness your progress can be motivating, and they can offer perspective on whether you're striking the right balance between assertiveness and empathy. They may also challenge you if they notice you're backsliding into old habits, which can provide the gentle push you need to keep growing. Remember that consistency doesn't mean rigidity. There may be rare occasions when breaking your own rule is the wisest course of action. Perhaps you decide to offer a heartfelt explanation to a loved one who genuinely deserves to hear it. That's fine, as long as you consciously choose it rather than feeling coerced into it. The essence of these techniques is empowerment. You determine when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to walk away. The more consistent you are, the more you'll trust yourself to make those calls in the heat of the moment. You've traveled through a comprehensive exploration of how to handle disrespect with dignity, composure, and unwavering self-respect. The techniques we've covered, silent stares, strategic non-engagement, refraining from explaining yourself, creating or maintaining distance, and literally and figuratively holding your head high, are not separate tools, but interconnected facets of a broader philosophy. They collectively embody the principle that you teach others how to treat you by what you tolerate or reject. By using these strategies in tandem, you set a standard that says, "I will not be diminished." As you move forward, remember that the internal work is just as important as the external actions. Building genuine confidence and self-worth rather than just going through the motions ensures that these techniques don't devolve into empty gestures. When your inner belief matches your outward resolve, you become a beacon of quiet strength. People will sense that your boundaries aren't mere posturing. They're rooted in a deep conviction that you deserve respect. And when you believe it, you'll be amazed at how naturally others start to believe it too. There will be bumps along the road, of course. You might occasionally doubt yourself or fall back into old habits. You might face pushback from individuals who are unwilling to adapt to your new standards. In some cases, you'll have to weigh the costs of maintaining certain relationships. But these challenges are part of the journey, a testament to the fact that meaningful change often comes with friction. Each difficult interaction can serve as a stepping stone to greater self-awareness and resolve. Finally, know that this approach is not about perpetual conflict or getting even. It's about positioning yourself to live a life guided by self-respect rather than by fear, guilt, or a sense of obligation to appease. The ultimate reward is peace of mind. When you no longer expend energy defending yourself against frivolous attacks, you free up emotional and mental space for the things that truly matter: your passions, your goals, and the relationships that enrich your life. In essence, by refusing to entertain disrespect, you elevate both yourself and the overall quality of your connections. Thank you for coming along on this journey of rediscovering and reaffirming your right to be treated with dignity. May these insights serve you well in every aspect of your life, from the workplace to social gatherings to intimate relationships. Remember, respect starts with you, and no one can take from you what you refuse to surrender. You've now discovered powerful, practical strategies for navigating disrespect and reclaiming your confidence in any situation. From embracing the silent stare to owning your personal space and boundaries, these techniques empower you to live on your terms and foster stronger, healthier relationships. Remember, self-respect isn't just an attitude, it's your strongest ally against negativity. Now it's your turn. Have you tried these methods in your own life, or do you have tips of your own to share? Let's start a meaningful conversation. Drop your experiences and insights in the comments below. And if this video resonated with you, hit that subscribe button to stay inspired and join a community focused on positive, real-world wisdom that truly makes a difference.